It all began over 100 years ago when dungeons appeared and brought forth an age of rampant monsters. To handle this crisis, humanity began to awaken special abilities, which became known as skills. At this moment, a man feels a firm hand pull his shoulder with force. He explains to Professor if he can establish the technique called tuning, a single skill could have multiple functions. The young man desperately tries to convince the professor with his recommendation in hand. The professor only looks at the paper with indifference, dropping it right after. Blue energy appears in the professor's hands as he demonstrates his disdain. The young man, visibly shaken and sweating, can barely process what he hears. The professor shouts that there is no value in reading work written by someone of such a low level. The story reveals that skill users became known as wizards, with academic history being the only metric that truly mattered to evaluate someone's worth. Those blessed with powerful skills graduated from the best institutions and led elite lives. On the other hand, those who did not receive such a blessing fell into ruin, without any chance of changing their destiny. The young man faces the harsh reality of this world with shock and despair. The professor asks if it is not common knowledge that the performance of a skill is immutable, calling the idea of tuning absurd. He sneers, accusing the young man of trying to pull a scam to get research funds with that paper full of hidden nonsense. The professor throws the papers into the air, dismissing any chance of hearing research coming from someone like him. Humiliated, the young man just watches the sheets fly, feeling the weight of his superior's contempt. Shortly after, the young man finds himself alone in a dirty and cold alley. He trembles with hatred and frustration, unable to contain the rage that consumes his thoughts. In a fit of fury, he throws a punch against a metal trash can. He wonders why no one understands the value of tuning, for if it were a common technology, it would give everyone a chance. Suddenly, a new group appears, and one of them celebrates having found a punching bag. Two youths with wicked smiles surround the young man in the alley. The young man is violently struck and falls to the ground, feeling excruciating pain. One of the aggressors asks, with irony, if it is really safe to hit the young man so much. The other replies that someone dressed in rags, like that, is clearly an uneducated ignoramus. A foot approaches, ready to deal another blow against the fallen man. The aggressor says that no one will care even if they finish him off right there. His companion agrees, laughing at the situation as they get even closer. The young man grinds his teeth, feeling deep pain as he tries to resist. He tries to fight back using a small flash of energy, but it is just a useless effort. The aggressor laughs, provoking the young man upon noticing that he is still trying to strike back. The young man from Tenjo University mocks him, saying that he would not even survive in the alleys if he challenged someone like them. The young man, still with the spark of energy at the tip of his finger, feels that his situation is desperate. He thinks that defeating those bullies would be easy if he could use tuning right after. He resigns himself to the memory that, in this world, academic history is absolute and he cannot do anything. He tries to get up quickly to escape that pursuit. Desperate, he runs out of the alley, shouting for help. He crosses the street begging for them to call the police, while pedestrians pass by ignoring his request. A mother protects her child, ignoring the man, while advising the child to study to get into a good university. The young man is in shock upon realizing that no one will help him. The aggressor appears quickly and strikes him, throwing him back against the alley wall. The impact against the bricks is brutal, leaving him stunned and injured. The two youths approach again, ready to finish what they started. One of them asks if the young man died, as both decide to flee the scene quickly. The young man is left lying on the ground, with blood running down his head, losing consciousness. With his last bit of strength, he clenches his fist and wonders if not having talent or a good history is truly a sin. He looks at the people passing by on the street, feeling like disposable trash. Extending his hand to the world, he wonders why he deserves such cruel treatment. As his hand loses its strength forth and falls. He laments having had his research, for which he sacrificed his life, treated like a joke. The man agonizes on the ground, questioning if he really will perish in such a miserable place. Suddenly, a young man wakes up sitting under the shade of a tree, as if he had just awakened from a dream. He looks around, confused by the sudden change in the environment and the feeling of being in a known place. Upon realizing that he is breathing, the young man stands up suddenly, exclaiming that he is alive. Upon observing the building in front of him, he recognizes the place as Tokunato Academy. He notes that this is exactly the same school building where he studied 70 years ago. The young man finds the situation strange, for he remembers that construction should have been demolished and rebuilt 10 years ago. A sudden thought crosses his mind, leaving him even more intrigued by the possibility. He hears a noise coming from nearby and asks for the scene to stop. An authoritative voice orders him to be quiet as imposing figures pass by him. Right ahead, a girl with purple hair screams in despair while being surrounded by a group of youths. The leader of the group displays an ID card, laughing at the situation arrogantly. He waves the student's document, claiming that she would not be able to buy anything without it. The aggressor holds the young woman's head, asking with a cruel smile if she wants the item back. He demands that she pay what she owes, while the young woman cries in panic. The young man declares with disdain that Class D trash has no human rights. At this exact moment, a shot of blue energy hits the aggressor's face squarely. The bully is thrown to the side with the impact, falling clumsily to the ground, while his friends watch the scene perplexed. His companion runs to help the leader, while the girl looks to the side, astonished by the unexpected rescue. The group questions who would have the courage to use a magic projectile skill against them. Shindo Kazuki appears standing, with his hands still emitting a blue glow, maintaining a serene posture. The aggressors are left speechless upon recognizing the young man, questioning how he managed to hit them from such a long distance. They try to rationalize that the maximum range of the skill was only 30 meters, and that he must have used another ability. Shindo Kazuki walks calmly, evaluating that everything seems to be under control. He analyzes his own skill, revealing that by sacrificing raw power and focusing on range, he achieved that impressive result. The girl, still sitting on the ground, calls out Shindo's name, visibly surprised by his change in attitude. He watches the energy emanate from his hand, realizing that both his knowledge and his skills remain intact. With this new power and the chance to start over, he believes he can change the course of events. He bitterly remembers how his research was rejected in the past for lack of academic prestige. Clenching his fist with conviction, he convinces himself that if time has truly turned back, this is his golden opportunity. He swears to himself that he will reach the top of the academy and transform his miserable life. Determined, Shindo walks toward the aggressors, radiating a firm presence. The aggressor gets up angrily, looking at the young man and calling him a bastard. He shouts, furious that Shindo is nothing but bottom-class trash. The bully continues to mock him, calling him the king of trash for possessing only the weakest skill. He threatens Shindo, saying that he would expel him from school in the blink of an eye if he reported him. Shindo counters with a challenging smile, asking if the aggressor really wants to be known as the elite who got beaten by a loser. The bullies are annoyed by the shot they received and decide that it is time to give the young man a beating. The main aggressor, still furious, grumbles about how Shindo is getting cheeky because of a lucky shot. He promises to make Shindo regret it for the rest of his life as he walks away with his companions. The other two members of the group call for their leader, asking him to wait for them. Shindo watches the trio walk away while the girl remains seated, processing what happened. In a classroom, a teacher shouts at the students, calling them the scum of society. He states that they have no future, but they should feel lucky to attend his classes. Shindo, sitting at his desk, watches the professor with indifference, finding the situation even familiar. He reflects on how Professor Yudobashi's insults bring back memories of the past, while recalling that the academy divides classes from A to D by ability. The young man thinks about his current situation, being a student enrolled in Class D. This class is popularly known as the loser's class. It serves as a visual example for the future elites, showing exactly what they should not become. become. Shindo looks to the side, focusing on someone specific and calling him a brat internally. Professor Yodobashi gets annoyed upon noticing that Shindo is not paying attention to his class, observing him from afar. With a malicious smile, he decides that humiliating the young man before the whole class is the perfect punishment. Yodobashi challenges Shindo to solve the fifth question, and the young man replies promptly that he will try. Shindo walks to the blackboard, under the professor's attentive and sarcastic gaze. The teacher thinks, mockingly, that is an old question from Tenjo University that even he cannot solve, making it impossible for any loser. Yodobashi waits anxiously, convinced that this is the lesson that Shindo deserves for disrespecting an elite. In an ironic tone, the professor asks if Shindo is having trouble with such a simple problem. Yodobashi mocks, reaffirming that this is why Shindo belongs to the lower class, and promptly gives the answer 689. The professor freezes upon seeing that Shindo got exactly the correct value. Remaining in a state of shock and denial, Shindo remains calm and asks the professor to show the correct resolution for his future studies. The young man knows very well of a crucial fact. It is common knowledge that Tenjo University releases only the answers to its past exams, but never the resolution procedures. Shindo pressures the professor, asking if something is wrong while Yodobashi holds the papers visibly nervous. The professor, sweating coldly, murmurs that he must have read it wrong, but admits that the value is indeed correct. Yodobashi gets enraged for having been made a fool by someone he considers a loser. The teacher swears that he will not let Shindo get away with this situation. Later, everyone is gathered on the court for combat training. Professor Yodobashi appears accompanied by Awaki, a student from Class C, ready for the setup. Yodobashi announces that Awaki kindly accepted to help with the class instruction today. Professor pretends to apologize for the inconvenience, but both exchange complicit glances of those planning a hit. Awaki comments that, as someone destined for the top, he feels grateful to be able to guide those below him. The professor then calls Shindo to the center of the court. He says, with a sinister smile, that he wants the most inferior student in the class to receive rigorous instruction from Awaki. Shindo accepts the command promptly, walking to face the opponent. The professor places his hand on Awaki's shoulder, making it official as an instruction match. Yodobashi whispers to the Class C student that he should not end the fight too quickly. Awaki understands the message perfectly, displaying a cruel expression as he prepares himself. Professor declares that is the end for Shindo, revealing that he ordered Awaki to break some of his limbs. Shindo remains motionless, thinking that a loser like him will not have money for decent treatment. Yodobashi smiles, sentencing that Shindo's fate will be to go straight from the hospital to the expulsion list. The other students whisper, commenting that Shindo is finished, and that this is what happens when a loser tries to stand out. The girl with purple hair watches the scene with concern, fearing the worst. Awaki asks if they can begin the lesson, as he positions himself to attack Shindo. Shindo replies politely that he looks forward to his cooperation. Professor Yodobashi, positioned far away, gives the start signal for the confrontation. Awaki activates his level 1 stone armor skill, preparing for the clash. He believes that Trash, who only knows how to use magic projectile, needs to be put in their proper place. Shindo agrees calmly with his comment. Awaki shouts that his armor could never be broken by a skill as pathetic as magic projectile. Shindo thinks to himself that he would not be so sure about that. He points his finger, concentrating an intense amount of blue energy. Awaki advances with his stone fist raised, shouting for Shindo to perish. Shindo reflects on how the performance of a skill should be fixed. Regardless of who uses it, power, range, and speed are generally predetermined. That is why the type and number of skills one is born with have always mattered the most. However, Shindo prepares the strike exactly as planned. He knows that a normal magic projectile would never be able to shatter that armor. By activating tuning, Shindo reduces range and speed to 0, pouring all the remaining resources into power. He remembers that, in this world, talent and academic history decide a person's entire life. With a shout of effort, he releases the massive shot. The shot hits Iwaki, who vomits blood as he feels the devastating impact pass through his defense. The aggressor is thrown far away, while his stone armor disintegrates completely into pieces. Shindo points his finger, firm in his purpose, to break the common sense of that academy. Shortly after, Shindo is sitting alone in his classroom, thoughtful. He reflects that perhaps he drew too much attention with his display of power. He knows there is only 1 year of academic life left, and he cannot afford to worry about appearances if he wants to move up a class. The girl with purple hair approaches and asks timidly if she can have lunch with him. She observes a bowl of feed, commenting on how difficult life in Class D must be. The student who accompanies her mocks, asking if they even have an allowance to buy a decent meal. With an authoritative expression, the student orders everyone from the lower class to kneel on the floor. He shouts that the Class D students should act like the elites. Unexpectedly, Shindo deals a precise energy blow that hits the provocateur's stomach. The aggressor falls to the ground, writhing in pain, while his colleagues watch the scene in pure terror. Shindo notes, satisfied, that his sniper ability remains as accurate as before, thanks to the adjustment focused on range and speed. He reaffirms that even common skills can have infinite variations if specialized, and that he will use this to reach the top. The girl, still shocked, asks what will happen if they find out that he attacked a student with a skill. Shindo replies that, if she says nothing, no one will suspect that the culprit was the owner of the weakest skill. He suggests that they eat now, that the noisy ones have been dealt with, and the girl agrees hesitantly. Both sit under the shade of a tree, a much quieter environment for the meal. The girl thanks Shindo for the help from the previous day. He says that she does not need to thank him, as he just did what he felt like doing. Shindo questions if that was why she came to talk to him, warning that walking with someone like him will bring trouble. The girl smiles, saying that she felt she needed to thank him properly. He notes that she is a very polite person. Shindo recalls that they never spoke during the time they at the academy, but that they got to know each other better after graduation. He remembers that, while researching tuning, he investigated a vast range of different abilities. He mentions that she was one of the rare skill users who helped him during that period. Shindo comments on the practical exam in pairs that will occur next week. The girl confirms the information with a nod and a murmur. He asks if she would like to form a pair with him, leaving her totally surprised. She questions how this is possible, since skills do not awaken late, and he should have only the ability that everyone knows. She asks the reason for the invitation, and Shindo decides to be honest. He reveals that he knows she possesses the evil eye of stasis ability. The girl panics, asking how he discovered that secret. Shindo explains that the Evil Eye series is rare, but he never imagined that a bearer would be hidden in Class D. He extends his hand, hoping she accepts his proposal. He adds that having her around would be something very reassuring for his plans. The girl admits to possessing a rare skill, but laments being just a dropout with 2 abilities. Shindo explains that the number of skills one is born with never increases, which defines the evaluation of a wizard. He comments that the average number of skills is 4, but he himself possesses only 1. Shindo reassures the girl, saying that he possesses only the weakest one, magic projectile. The girl confesses that she hid her skill for fear that they would expect too much of her. She laments that, despite the rarity, she is still limited to just 2 abilities. The girl vents about how people called her useless, and she did not want him to think the same. She confesses the dread of believing in herself and being hit again by the harsh reality. Shindo states that his goal is to be promoted to Class B in the next exam. He asks again if she does not want to come with him. Shindo explains that the biggest obstacle in this exam will be the clusters. He realizes that the girl does not understand the term, since Class D is never recruited for these groups. Shindo explains that, simplifying, clusters are groups of students who unite to monopolize the best grades. Shindo explains that, in written tests, students from clusters coordinate mass cheating among themselves. As for the practical tests, they manipulate the results of the fights to ensure that everyone involved achieves high scores. The girl asks if that is not against the rules, and Shindo supposes that their leader probably bribes the teachers. He comments that, if that is the case of the man known as the king of the clusters, that would be easily ignored. Shindo says that most students in the elite classes are members of these groups. The girl understands that, although the exam is in pairs, they will certainly coordinate themselves in dozens to win. Shindo smiles, stating that he already has a plan in mind. Meanwhile, a student runs, desperately trying to catch up to another, begging him to wait. The young man who was fleeing turns abruptly, annoyed by his companion's insistence. The aggressor tries to throw a punch, bellowing that someone like him should not get in the way. The other retaliates with a fast kick, catching the aggressor by surprise and knocking him down. He complains aloud, asking why he would have to waste his time dealing with Class D trash. The fallen young man apologizes, trembling with fear after being attacked by his colleague. The aggressor, with his back turned, orders the other not to tell him what to do. He walks away calmly, questioning if the other's name was really Shindo Kazuki. The youth thinks that, if Shindo continues to abuse his luck, he will not be able to simply ignore him. He introduces himself as Neo Jin, the fourth-ranked student of Class A, proving that he is one of the biggest names in the academy. All students gather in front of a large portal, waiting for instructions. A hooded instructor announces that the practical training is about to start. He informs that everyone must clear the dungeon with the partners they previously registered. The instructor explains that the monsters that appear will give points depending on their type. The score is granted to the student who delivers the final blow to the enemies. The final evaluation of the grades will depend on the sum total of the pair's points. The students listen to the rules with tension, feeling the pressure of the challenge. The instructor raises his hand and orders the official start of the exam. The groups run hurriedly toward the shining portal. The girl worries, noting that if they take too long, they will end up being left behind. She tries to hurry Shindo so they can enter the dungeon soon. Other students push her aggressively, telling her not to get in the way of the students from the higher classes. Group leaders allow their allies to pass, blocking the others. Students pass through the portal, while others are prevented from proceeding. The portal remains open, with students from the clusters controlling who enters. Shindo realizes that they established an internal password so that only members of their class can pass. Anyone who does not belong to their group is blocked by the student barricade. Shindo notes that in this way, they will fall behind in the score. The girl despairs, thinking that there is no way for them to overcome this obstacle. Shindo says that there is no need for worry. He suggests that they let the desperate crowd pass first. Shindo comments, with a smile, that it is lucky the class of students are not participating in this exam. He observes that, without them around, there is a perfect way to get around this situation. Shindo and his partner decide that it is the right time to enter. They cross the portal without being bothered. Upon arriving, they realize that all the other teams have already moved forward. Shindo invites the girl to keep going in the training. They enter a dense forest area inside the dungeon. Shindo asks her to follow the agreed upon plan. The girl activates her ability, creating a protective dome with radar level 1. Shindo uses tuning on her ability. He drastically reduces the precision and duration of the radar. With this, he manages to expand the detection range massively. The girl can barely believe in the amplitude of the range her ability reached. She recalls that, normally, abilities only increase in level with constant training, evolving gradually. Shindo explains that the performance of a skill is something fixed, a basic knowledge that any magic user dominates. The girl realizes, however, that Shindo's tuning is different, as it alters the performance without needing to raise the ability level. She observes Shindo's hands, amazed at his ability to adjust the power of any technique. The girl feels a chill when thinking about what would happen if this power became public. She understands that, if this technology is revealed, the common sense of the entire world will be turned upside down. Shindo concentrates his energy, preparing himself to apply the adjustment again. He decides to reduce the power to 0, cutting the projectile speed to reallocate all the resource into range. With a flick of his finger, he molds the magic projectile skill into an aerial suspension specification. Spheres of blue energy begin to float in the air, forming a strategic trail above them. Shindo jumps onto one of the projectiles, using it as a solid support in the middle of nowhere. He continues jumping from one sphere to another, gaining height and agility in front of the girl. She can barely contain her astonishment at seeing him use the projectiles as steps to go up. Shindo reaches an elevated position, deactivating the offensive capacity of the shots, so that they work only as platforms. The girl activates her evil eye of stasis, whose golden gears spin intensely. Shindo uses the moment to move quickly in the air. She clarifies that the evil eye of stasis is capable of paralyzing the movement of any object she targets. Although it does not work on living beings, the skill can fix objects like shoes to the floor instantly. Shindo takes advantage of the gap to remain suspended, maintaining his height advantage. He admits that, while he focuses on creating these supports, his aim gets a bit impaired. Shindo readjusts the tuning, reducing power, maintaining speed, and moving the rest of the resources to range. The girl begins to dictate the enemy's coordinates, indicating precise directions and distances. Shindo praises her performance, satisfied with the collaboration. He fires a volley of projectiles with the sniper specification. The shots hit the opponent's protections and vital points with absolute precision. Shindo notes that only 3 of them remained. He suggests that they change positions soon so as not to be found. The moment is perfect, and he orders the girl to go find the targets. They descend and surround the 4 aggressors who were trying to ambush them. The enemies try to react with various level 2 skills, such as rock cannon and wind blade. Shindo pulls the girl to the side, escaping the direct attack. One of the aggressors growls, furious for having predicted that Shindo would try to dodge that way. The girl shouts worriedly, fearing for Shindo. Shindo remains calm while a heavy rock passes close to his body. The aggressor, frustrated, tries to finish the young man with an aggressive charge. The attack is contained, generating an explosion of fragments. Shindo observes that the opponent's rock cannon failed by just 3 centimeters, as he did not calculate the necessary range. The aggressor goes into shock, wondering how Shindo could know the exact distance of his skill. The other students around do not understand how someone could memorize the performance of so many different skills. The group leader tries to convince himself that all that was nothing but a stroke of luck. He trembles at the thought of the existence of a mage capable of fighting while monitoring the specifications of thousands of skills. To him, the idea of such a monster existing seems impossible. Shindo questions if they are uniting in pairs from different classes, only to eliminate rivals unfairly. He makes it clear that he had no intention of attacking anyone, but that now the situation has changed. Shindo activates the tuning again, gathering blue energy in his hand. The aggressor tries desperately to reactivate his rock armor. Shindo is faster and deals a sequence of rapid shots. The attack hits the aggressor squarely, knocking him down immediately. Shindo walks across the battlefield, explaining that he split the projectile into 4 parts, which should not have been lethal, just enough to knock the opponents out. Shindo maintains his focus, remembering that they still have the exam to complete. He orders the girl to protect herself from the monsters on her own. The girl repeats, perplexed, that this is an exam. The aggressor, fallen and bloodied, laughs hysterically, saying that their exam ended a long time ago. He explains that, by this point, elite students have already gathered all the monsters in one place to monopolize the score. The girl realizes that the cluster's plan was to divide the prey exclusively among its affiliated members. The aggressor laughs, mocking that there is not a single monster left in the dungeon for the losers to gain points. Despair takes over the girl upon realizing that their goal has been thwarted. She clenches her fist, feeling the frustration of not being able to change her destiny. With tears in her eyes, she vents that she really wanted to believe in change alongside Shindo. The aggressor takes advantage of the moment to mock, stating that lower-class trash could never change. Shindo deals a quick and precise blow, silencing the aggressor instantly. He asks his partner to stay calm, maintaining his serene posture. Shindo observes the scenario, satisfied that everything has gone exactly as he had calculated. The girl asks if he really can fix the situation, and Shindo guarantees that it is enough to exploit the weakness inherent in the cluster system. She questions what weakness that would be. Shindo explains that, although working in a group seems efficient, it is enough to break a basic premise for the whole system to collapse easily. He chooses a strategic location for them to position themselves. From high up, they observe the elite group surrounded by a large number of monsters. The girl notes that the elite's defenses are impeccable, making any direct attack impossible. Shindo vehemently disagrees with this statement. He prepares his move, concentrating the power of his skill at the tip of his finger. Shindo reveals that that is the strike that will destroy the entire cluster strategy. The shot crosses the air with precision, hitting one of the monsters in the middle of the pack. The creature falls dead, generating an immediate impact on the elite students' formation. The students panic, without understanding who carried out such a precise attack. They look high up, shocked that someone fired a sniper attack from that distance. Shindo knows that the more he extends the range through tuning, the more the projectile's power and speed drop. However, that is more than enough to finish off monsters that have already been weakened by others. But the cluster students shout that they need to stop the intruder, fearing losing the score they accumulated. They get into conflict among themselves, questioning why they should not simply go out, hunting the monsters on their own. The disagreement turns into a physical fight, with one student hitting another out of greed. A student shouts that that is not the moment for internal fights. Chaos spreads, with spells flying in all directions as the group's cooperation falls apart. Shindo explains that a cluster is an organization made to help everyone achieve high grades through cooperation. He notes that, for this relationship to work, there must be enough profit for all members. Shindo runs with a treasure chest of rewards, knowing that, when the prizes end, the system collapses. The group turns against itself to protect its own share of points. The girl is impressed by the ease with which Shindo manipulated so many students. She cannot believe that someone so genius was hidden in Class D the whole time. Panic increases among the elites as they suffer from unexpected attacks. One of the leaders asks, perplexed, what is happening? His eyes widen before an unforeseen threat. A colossal beast, much more powerful than the other monsters, emerges from the shadows. The girl lets out a scream of horror upon seeing the monster. Shindo curses, lamenting that a creature of that type has appeared just now. He feels that the presence of that beast is completely different from any other common monster. The creature roars, being identified as an irregular. The warning resonates through the dungeon. An irregular has been detected inside the exam area. The teachers run to the portal, ordering all students to avoid contact with the dangerous creature. The girl observes the monstrous creature with terror, finally recognizing it as an irregular. Shindo explains that these are monsters that underwent sudden mutations inside the dungeon, something rare to happen. He concludes that the monster must have been lucky enough to survive and grow without being removed by the instructors. The girl notes with apprehension that the difficulty of that beast surpasses any limit planned by the academy for the exam. She calls for Shindo, who replies coldly that he has no intention of playing the hero of justice. Even so, he admits that he cannot simply stay standing watching the destruction. Shindo orders the girl to hide until the exam ends. The creature attacks the group of students violently, and Shindo thinks that it probably does not even count toward the official score. He jumps toward the monster, reiterating that that fight has nothing to do with the exam. Shindo worries that, by intervening, he will end up dragging his partner into danger. The girl screams his name, desperate at his attitude. He orders everyone to run from there as fast as possible. The students flee in panic as the monster's shadow is cast over them. The beast roars furiously, displaying sharp fangs. The monster advances, cornering one of the defenseless students. The student, paralyzed with fear, cries out for help while the monster prepares for the final blow. Shindo activates tuning, sacrificing range and speed to raise the attack's power to the maximum. He uses the remaining resources to alter the form of his magic projectile. Shindo creates a protective shield-shaped barrier, blocking the beast's devastating attack. The saved student is left speechless upon seeing Shindo's improvised defense. Other students watch shocked, not believing that he managed to stop the monster's blow. Shindo feels his arm go numb just from the impact of that single charge. He smiles, recognizing that that creature's strength is at a level totally superior to the monsters they faced before. The beast raises its claw claw again, preparing another heavy blow. Shindo is hit by a quick and brutal move. He recovers quickly, impressed by the opponent's speed. Shindo activates tuning for a new counterattack. He fires a magic projectile with piercing configuration straight at the monster. The attack penetrates the creature's skin, injuring it. The monster focuses its red and bloodthirsty gaze on Shindo, growling in pain. Shindo laughs, realizing that, even adjusted, the power of a level 1 magic projectile is still insufficient to defeat the beast. The beast deals a massive claw blow, forcing Shindo to move. He thinks that, if not even a point-blank shot works, the situation will get complicated. Shindo admits that will be a huge headache. He runs toward the monster, risking everything on a new plan. Shindo kneels before the beast, concentrating energy at the tip of his finger. He aims at a specific point, hoping to cause the necessary damage. Projectile hits the beast's eye with a blue flash. The creature roars in agony as blood runs down its face. Shindo realizes that the attack worked, but not with the efficacy he imagined. The monster becomes even more enraged, investing against him with all its strength. Shindo reflects that an attack motivated only by rage should not be so coordinated. One of the students, injured, watches the fight while Shindo tries to find an opening. Shindo hesitates, realizing that, if he dodges, the attack will hit the student who is behind him. He notes that there is not enough time to switch the configuration to shield mode. Shindo decides to cross his arms to minimize the impact and try to absorb the blow in a non-fatal way. He shouts for the girl's stasis magic eye, asking for help. The girl's eye shines, fixing the beast's claw in the air for a brief instant. Shindo takes advantage of the creature's momentary hesitation to deliver a precise counterattack. He retreats and calls for the girl, preparing the next step of the fight. Shindo is surprised to note that the girl used the stasis skill to lock his uniform, improvising a quick armor. She declares with firmness that she will also fight, refusing to run away as she always used to do. Shindo warns with an ironic smile that battle only brings danger and no point rewards for the exam, even knowing the risk. She says that she does not want to run away without doing everything within her reach. She suggests that if they cannot win, they must at least buy time until the instructors arrive. Shindo takes a step forward, saying that he needs to correct one thing about her perspective. He declares, pointing his finger, that he never enters fights where he does not have any chance of coming out victorious. Shindo smiles with confidence upon realizing that his ability finally leveled up. An aura of intense blue flame surrounds Shindo's entire body. He channels his energy to conjure the magic projectile at level 2. The girl observes the scene amazed, remembering that all of his shots until now had been level 1. She wonders if his ability really just leveled up at that exact moment. Shindo explains that he spent his entire life researching abilities, which includes efficient methods to raise them. He knows that facing strong opponents and possessing total understanding of one's own skill are essential factors for this. When these two conditions meet, a skill has much more chances of evolving quickly. Now, with the level raised, the performance of the magic projectile increased, leaving him to pour all that power into the attack. He readjusts the skill's tuning to the piercing shot mode. Shindo aims directly at the beast roaring in front of him. He accumulates all the energy in a concentrated shot. The piercing attack hits the monster squarely, crossing its body and making it roar in pain. The irregular coughs blood, unable to resist the devastating damage it received. Shindo keeps his finger pointed, observing the effects of his shot. The colossal beast collapses dead in the forest, releasing smoke from the wound. The girl is stunned to note that Shindo's destructive power was completely different from that of moments ago. An announcement at the site warns that the exam has been concluded and all students must return immediately. The girl is astonished by the sudden ending, while Shindo just states that time is up. Shindo worries, knowing that, if the irregular is worth 0 points, his promotion to Class B will become uncertain. Even so, he feels relieved to see that no one ended up dying in the process. The academy inspectors arrive at the scene and find the body of the defeated irregular on the ground. The inspector is shocked to learn that a Class D student was responsible for defeating the creature. Professor Yodobashi, gnawing his nails in anger, insists that Shindo must have cheated somehow Now, another instructor reprimands Yodobashi for doubting his own student, suggesting that such an attitude explains why he only takes care of Class D. The inspector questions how they should deal with that unprecedented situation. The instructor ponders that the recordings prove Shindo's victory, but strict rules say that the monster is worth 0 points. However, he decides to make an exception and grants special points to Shindo for having prioritized the lives of his colleagues over his grade. The inspector is surprised to understand the consequences of that decision. The official announcement reveals that the pair of Shindo and Kagami conquered the first place overall, ensuring their promotion to Class B. Kagami is extremely happy with the unexpected result. In the cafeteria, she rejoices before a hearty and delicious meal. Shindo begins to eat, and Kagami comments with a smile that they could never pay for that when they were in Class D. She jokes that he is devouring the food very quickly. Shindo remembers his past life, in which he reduced his expenses to the limit for research resources, spending decades without a good meal. Suddenly, an imposing student approaches behind Shindo and asks his name. Kagami observes the newcomer with surprise and hesitation. Shindo realizes that the young man in front of him is the absolute leader of Class A. The young man smiles confidently, praising Shindo's quick perception. He sits beside them, pointing out that Shindo made a small slip in his statement. The youth corrects himself, declaring with pride that he is, in fact, the king of the entire academy. He reveals that he watched the recordings of Shindo's exam from the previous day with attention. The king of Class A extends his hand, saying that Shindo seems to be a quite interesting opponent. Shindo just thanks the young man for the compliment in a very simple and short way. The king of Class A asks if Shindo plans to continue pairing with Kagami from now on. With a serious look, Shindo inquires, what is the true goal behind that question? The young man admits that Shindo has ability, but warns that his luck will not last forever. He adds that, if Shindo wants to eliminate the risk of demotion, now that he has moved up a class, he should accept his proposal. Shindo realizes right away that is a direct attempt recruitment for the cluster. The young man asks what would happen if he decided to refuse the offer. With an intimidating look, the leader of Class A replies, dryly, that he will crush him. Shindo lets out a long sigh before that arrogant and unnecessary threat. He stands up, stating that he has no intention of exposing their dirty tricks, and asks to be left out of it. Shindo stops before leaving and comments that he ended up forgetting to mention a crucial detail. He points out that, although the young man said that he fought to move up to Class B, his final goal is far from being that. The cluster leader observes him with surprise, not understanding what he meant by that. Shindo gives a confident smile, declaring that he plans to move up to the prestigious elite class where the young man is. The youth lets out an ironic laugh upon hearing Shindo's audacious declaration. He ponders that, as a subordinate, Shindo would be a failure, but as entertainment, he is approved. The leader of Class A repeats the young man's name with disdain, while he walks away slowly. He leaves a clear warning that there will be no turning back for the bold words that Shindo uttered today. Kagami and Shindo leave the cafeteria carrying their trays, leaving the leader of Class A behind. The young man remains sitting alone at his table in the school cafeteria. His companions approach and ask what they should do regarding Shindo's disrespect. The leader orders harshly that the two shut their mouths, and for all, he says irritably that they should not try to give him advice with the pathetic intelligence they possess. Scared by the aggressive reaction, the subordinate bows and apologizes immediately. The leader thinks that Shindo is the ideal prey, and that finishing him off too quickly would be tedious. At that instant, a known figure approaches, and he notes that the moment is perfect. He sketches a wicked smile, thinking that perhaps he should send that girl after Shindo. On another day, Shindo and his new colleagues tidy up their things in the Class B room. After the end of class, Kagami puts her notebooks in her backpack, letting out a sigh of relief for one more day overcome. Shindo approaches and comments that she seems quite tired. She smiles timidly, admitting that the subjects in Class B are much more difficult than those in Class D. Kagami notices that Shindo seems relaxed, and he replies that that level of study is perfectly controllable. Suddenly, She hears the whispers of other students in the room and wonders if they are talking about Shindo. Colleagues whisper among themselves, doubting the legitimacy of the promotion of someone who came from the lowest class. Shindo puts his hand on Kagami's shoulder and tells her not to let those comments bother her. With determination, he states that, if they continue presenting consistent results, people's opinions will naturally change. Kagami thanks him for his attitude, but notices that the school hallway is louder than normal. Shindo also notices the commotion and stays on alert upon looking toward the door. A girl with light blue hair appears at the entrance of the classroom, drawing everyone's attention. Shindo recognizes her as Shirazaya Sojiro, the untouchable genius who held the top of class A for the last 3 years and who will become the strongest in the world in the future. He wonders, tense, what would bring someone of such prestige to the Class B room. She announces coldly that she is looking for a certain student. Upon trying to say the name of the student she seeks, she hesitates and confesses, comically, that she ended up forgetting. She gives up trying to remember, commenting that she came there, but did not find anyone who looked really strong. Class B students observe the scene with cold sweat, intimidated by the young woman's imposing presence. Shirazaya apologizes for the interruption and begins to withdraw from the scene. At that instant, Shindo decides to make himself known and calls her. He asks if the student she was looking for by chance would not be Shindo Kazuki. A climate of extreme tension is established when the looks of Shindo and Shirazaya finally cross. Shiraya puts her hand on her head and confirms with indifference that might indeed be the name she was looking for. Shindo takes a step forward, thinking that situation ended up unfolding in a favorable way. He walks with firmness and, looking into her eyes, challenges her openly to a duel. The young man knows that she may be just a student now, but that in the future she will reign at the top of the world. With his fist closed, Shindo feels the burning desire to test how far his tuning can reach against her. Suddenly, the student council president approaches and asks the reason for all that commotion. Shirazaya Sojiro, the brilliant second, ranked of the year from Class A, observes the situation with seriousness. The students around begin to whisper, surprised by the unexpected arrival of the president. He adjusts his glasses and asks her what exactly she is doing there. She points to Shindo in a relaxed way, explaining that the young man apparently wishes to have a duel with her. The president inquires about the duel, remembering that the use of training fields is allowed if both parties agree. The class leader approaches with his subordinates, remarking that things are getting quite interesting. He gives a provocative smile upon seeing that a fearless challenger has finally appeared. He tells her that, as the greatest genius since the academy was founded, she might as well accept a quick sparring session. The president glares at him with suspicion, asking what he is planning with that provocation. Unfazed, she puts her hand on her head and decides that she just needs to accept the challenge. She agrees to get it over with so she can head home. The class leader celebrates that both parties are in agreement, catching the president's attention. The scene shifts to the grand training arena under the clear sky. Kagami watches Shindo with apprehension, not understanding his reasons for the challenge. The president admits he thought they had some unfinished business, but realizes the situation is different. He wonders why Shindo insisted on such a reckless duel against the best in the academy. Shindo reveals his true motives for facing his opponent in his thoughts. He confesses that he wanted to see how much of his current power would be effective against her strength. The president listens to the explanation seriously and adjusts his glasses. With a friendly smile, he wishes for Shindo to fight with everything he has. He walks to the arena and takes his position to coordinate the start of the combat. The president warns that unlike the other fields, they cannot simply destroy everything here. He warns his opponent not to use that devastating technique during the duel. She replies with disdain that there will be no need to use all of her power. The president takes his post and announces the official start of the combat. In the stands, the students whisper that Shindo is only confident because he moved up a class by luck. They comment that challenging the top student of the year is foolish, and that he cannot see reality. Kagami grips her hands tightly, cheering silently for Shindo. The president raises his hand and gives the signal for the two to begin the battle. The opponents stare at each other with absolute seriousness, waiting for the right moment. He authorizes the start, and both instantly prepare for the first move. Shindo activates the magic projectile with piercing configuration, while she invokes the level 3 ice projectile. The spells collide in the air with great speed and a bluish glow. She grimaces with effort upon noticing the unusual force of Shindo's impact. The collision results in a massive burst of energy and shards of ice in the arena. Shindo smiles mockingly and asks if he has finally managed to catch her attention. The spectators in the stands are shocked to see that his magic projectile tied with a level 3 elemental attack. Kagami rejoices to see that, even against a Class A opponent, Shindo did not back down an inch. Shindo assesses that the previous exchange put the pace of the combat in his favor, but he knows he cannot let his guard down. He focuses, aware that he needs to land a decisive blow to take full control. The young man conjures a new magic projectile and begins the tuning adjustment. She dodges the attack with an agile and precise evasive movement. Shindo realizes that even with the projectile's full focus on speed, she is still too fast for him to keep up. He changes tactics and chooses to use a tuning with area diffusion style. Several spells fall at the same time, forcing her to dodge acrobatically time and again. Shindo blocks Hamikawa's swift kick by crossing his arms firmly while feeling the great physical impact from his opponent. The young man is dragged backward by the force of the blow and is surprised by the tremendous agility demonstrated by the girl. He becomes pensive, realizing she was able to perfectly deflect his previous attack without suffering a single scratch. Shindo smiles, deducing that his opponent possesses the legendary ability known worldwide as the Evil Eye of Perception. This rare technique from the Evil Eye series is exactly why Himikawa is considered one of the strongest in the world. Shindo points his finger and focuses attention on the mysterious glow emanating directly from his opponent's right eye. This ocular ability allows her to see in advance the exact trajectory of all the enemy's hostile intent. She can predict the path of any attack and dodge, easily using her reflexes enhanced by her abilities. Hamikawa dodges another spell from Shindo, showing that this evasive style is the foundation of her entire combat method. The girl counterattacks quickly by invoking her level 3 ice magic projectiles to pressure her opponent. Shindo reacts instantly by creating a sturdy magic shield to fully contain the elemental ice shots. He realizes he will not be able to hit her just by increasing the speed of his projectiles while that eye is active. Shindo maps out a new strategy and decides he must attack precisely in the millisecond that her vision fails. Himikawa finds the trajectory of one of the new blue projectiles strange and notices that this magic behaves very unusually. She notes that each shot fired by him carries a speed and power level slightly different from the others. The young woman realizes she was mistaken to think he only alternated between the basic level 1 and 2 configurations. She discovers that Shindo is freely altering every parameter of his abilities to adapt to the pace of the combat. However, the girl sketches a smile, noticing there is a constant pattern behind all of the young man's shots. She concludes that his slow projectiles cause much more damage, while the fast shots are far less destructive. Since the strongest attacks are too slow, she decides to ignore these shots to advance quickly toward him. The young man prepares another concentrated spell, activating the piercing mode of his magic projectile to try to contain her advance. Himikawa sees the slowness of the blue sphere and decides to pass right through it to close the distance and end the fight. She approaches at full speed, believing that is the perfect moment to land the decisive blow in the fight. Shindo knows that her eye predicts trajectories by reading the malice and hostile intent embedded in every launched attack. This means her ability becomes completely useless against a shot that carries no intent at all. He conjures a projectile that makes a surprising curve in the air and attacks the girl from behind in a totally unexpected way. She clicks her tongue upon being caught off guard by the attack that came from a direction her ability could not track. The shot hits the opponent with precision, causing her to lose her balance and let out a moan of pain from the impact. Shindo reveals that he waited patiently for the exact instant she would lower her guard against the slower projectiles, explains that the great weakness of that special vision is the total inability to predict attacks without direct intent. The young man makes an aiming gesture with his fingers and warns that she has finally exposed herself to danger by falling into his mental trap. Shindo adds that seeing the attack coming does no good if the person no longer has the physical space to dodge. Cornered, she attempts one last desperate reaction and begins to conjure her powerful elemental magic called Ice Paradise. Shindo prepares his high power shot in piercing mode and mocks, saying the opponent's reaction was too slow. Suddenly, the energy accumulated at the tip of the young man's finger dissipates, and he is shocked to see that his magic simply failed. Shindo panics, realizing his spell suffered a critical casting failure right at the most crucial moment of the fight. He looks around, confused, and realizes that magic interference did not come from any ability belonging to him. Manhwa. Unable to defend himself in time, Shindo is hit square by her ice attack and lets out a scream of pain as he is knocked down. The judge ends the combat immediately, declaring Manhwa the grand winner of the duel in the training arena. Shindo is left lying on the arena floor, grumbling in frustration for having lost the dispute in such a strange and unfair way. The students in the stands mock him, saying he became arrogant and ran out of energy, proving that his promotion was just luck. However, Shindo continues to lie there, pensive, knowing full well he still had a large amount of mana left. He supports his hand on the ground in anger, realizing that someone's secretaged his ability before he could pull the trigger. Kagami runs desperately toward him across the arena and asks if he is okay after having taken such a violent attack. Shindo stands up and says he is fine, although he remains pensive, trying to understand who was responsible for the sabotage. Jin turns his back with disdain and decides to leave while his subordinate is surprised by the group leader's attitude. The students continue laughing and saying Shindo learned his place, deeply irritating Jin with that conversation. The group leader turns around irritably and glares at his colleagues, asking if they really believe the nonsense they are saying. The students are apprehensive and confused, not understanding why Jin is defending the young man who was just defeated. The red-haired young man walks away in silence, leaving the other students apprehensive as they whisper his name. Himikawa approaches Jin and asks directly if he was the one who caused the failure in Shindo's magic. He denies it, saying he would never spoil the unique opportunity to witness the young man's true strength. Faced with his sincere answer, she just closes her eyes and decides to drop the subject without insisting further. As she leaves the place, the girl guarantees to herself that she will make sure to remember the name Shindo Kazuki. Jin scratches his head, intrigued about who could have interfered in the dispute at such an important moment. He focuses his pensive gaze on the arena, still impressed with the last mysterious attack unleashed by Shindo. Jin smiles in a wicked way, realizing that the boy is much more interesting and dangerous than he imagined. In another moment, Kagami celebrates with enthusiasm upon managing to solve a difficult question in her notebook. The two continue studying patiently in the library to prepare for the upcoming difficult exams. Shindo explains that the functioning of magic abilities follows some logical principles that many ignore. He reveals that this deep knowledge does not exist in the common textbooks that the other students use. Kagami is impressed to discover the extreme level of dedication and study that he possesses on the subject. Shindo minimizes the situation, saying he studies as a hobby and that is not necessary to go that far just to pass. She thanks him for the help with her studies, as the current content is very different from what they saw in Class D. Kagami opens a beautiful smile upon feeling that she will finally manage to avoid a failing grade on the next evaluation. Shindo encourages her to continue practicing, reminding her that failing would cause immediate expulsion from the academy. Suddenly, a student passes by, pretending to trip in a clumsy way near the table. Where the two are concentrated, the young man tries to knock a glass of water onto the table to maliciously disrupt their study session. With scary reflexes, Shindo catches the glass of water in mid-air before it spills and ruins all the material. With a serious and intimidating look, Shindo warns the intruder about an important rule of that study environment. He asks if the boy does not know that carrying glasses without lids is strictly prohibited inside the library. Nervous and sweating from fear at Shindo's reaction, the student apologizes quickly and gives up on causing more trouble. Shindo realizes the intruder was just waiting for the exact moment to sabotage their study notebooks. He warns Kagami that the boy was probably a member of the cluster sent just to try to distract them. Shindo thinks his plan is very pathetic and realizes the only tactic of the clusters is to disrupt others in the exams. At the end of the day, Shindo walks with the girl under the light of the sunset. While reflecting on the path of his journey, Kagami thanks him kindly for the time Shindo dedicated, helping her study throughout that afternoon. The young man responds calmly that he does not mind, as the teaching also served as a good review for him. She praises her friend, admiring the fact that he is extremely strong in combat and at the same time so intelligent. Shindo explains that, even being strong, he would not be able to move up a class if he did not show good academic performance. He thinks to himself that the truth is that he has already studied the equivalent of a lifetime in his past. Kagami asks with curiosity if his great goal is really to secure a spot in the highly contested Class A. Shindo confirms that graduating in the highest class is a mandatory requirement to be able to carry out his plan. Curious, she asks what would be this great life goal that he is pursuing with such determination. The young man reveals directly that his true desire is to manage to enter the prestigious Tenjo University. Kagami is in shock at the declaration, knowing that is the most important educational institution in the entire country. Shindo reveals that he wants to popularize the tuning technique so that any ordinary person can use it freely. Kagami ponders that society values the rarity of innate magic abilities too much, and that this is difficult to change. Shindo counters by stating that if everyone can use tuning, the outdated rules of the whole world will be broken. He explains that people without innate talent will finally be able to reach the top just with effort and training. The young man admits that his tuning theory is currently seen by society as a heretical and dangerous teaching. He knows that presenting his thesis without having the support of a great academic authority would make his research be discarded. Because of this, Shindo needs unquestionable prestige that prevents people from simply ignoring his voice. Clenching his fist tightly, he vows to end once and for all this unfair era where the talentless are treated like trash. The young man wishes to create a better world where no one needs to give up their own dreams for lack of luck at birth. Kagami is deeply touched by Shindo's words and praises the greatness of his feelings and goals. She confesses shyly that she does not have such a grand goal, only wanting to manage to graduate safely. She walks a little further ahead while thinking about her own journey. Throughout those years of learning, Kagami turns around with a sincere smile and says her greatest desire is to be able to be proud of having given her best in everything. She smiles and blushes slightly while admitting that this is a very small dream compared to Shindo's great goals. Shindo encourages the girl, saying that her goal of graduating by giving her best is something excellent. Meanwhile, Neojin appears sitting imposingly in a large red armchair with a wicked smile. The student who tried to disrupt the studies in the library reports to the leader that he followed the orders as agreed. Neojin exhibits an intimidating expression and asks the boy directly if he failed in his sabotage mission. The subordinate trembles with fear before the direct questioning and tries to find a reasonable justification. The elite group leader stands up slowly and says cynically for the boy not to be so scared. Neojin asks the subordinate if he by any chance has ever hurt anyone who followed his orders even while failing. The scared young man gestures with his hands and denies it quickly. quickly, believing that he will get out of that situation without punishment. Unexpectedly, Neo-Jin grabs the student's head with extreme force from top to bottom, making him scream in agony. The leader says that is the just punishment for him trying to hide his failure, and the boy asks for forgiveness. Crying, Neo-Jin reveals that interference in the library was just a preliminary trap to test the rivals. He plans to crush the people close to Shindo first, before going after his main target for good. Neo-Jin exhibits a sadistic and focused look as he decrees who will be the next defenseless victim of his cruel plans. The long-awaited day of the written exam finally arrives with Kagami sitting in her class looking very worried. The young woman despairs internally upon noticing that something very wrong has just happened during the test. She cries silently at the thought that she could be expelled from the academy if things continue at that pace. The entire class remains in absolute silence under the attentive supervision of the teacher positioned in front of the board. The teacher announces in a loud voice the official end of the test and orders everyone to put their pens down on the tables. Shindo thinks the situation is strangely calm and thinks that the entire evaluation went smoothly and without problems. He is intrigued by not having suffered any aggressive interference from the members of Neo-Jin's cluster. The teacher begins to collect the exam papers from the students while warning that the exam is over for everyone. Suddenly, a student sitting in the front rows raises her hand, calling for the teacher's attention with urgency. The teacher glares at her seriously and asks what she wishes to report that is so important at that moment. The girl asks in a loud voice for the teacher to perform a thorough check directly on Kagami's table. She makes a serious accusation against her classmate, claiming to have seen the young woman cheating throughout the entire test. Shindo listens to the report and realizes he has finally discovered what was the true-sorted strategy of the rival group. He deduces immediately that the cluster's plan from the beginning was not to hit him directly, but to focus on Kagami. Another student from the group quickly raises her arm in support, confirming that she also witnessed the cheating. Several complicit students begin to manifest in a chorus to pressure the teacher to act against the girl. Kagami enters a complete state of panic upon realizing she is being the target of an unfair collective trap. Shindo knows that for a large group like theirs it is very simple to plant fake evidence and change the class's opinion. The accuser points her finger aggressively, questioning what Kagami would be hiding under her own table. Kagami stands up, scared, and denies the accusations vehemently, although she feels the weight of everyone's suspicious looks. A paper containing secret notes appears fallen on the floor, appearing to be the definitive proof of the young woman's cheating. The girl is stunned by the appearance of that mysterious sheet and guarantees she never possessed a cheat sheet like that. The teacher questions her severely, and she tries to deny it tremblingly without managing to convince the man of her innocence. She looks at the fake test on the floor with despair, knowing she will be formally accused if the teacher picks up the paper. The teacher walks toward Kagami's desk, warning that he will perform a detailed inspection to clear up doubts. Kagami watches the teacher approach slowly, not knowing how to react to escape the terrible situation. The girl's eyes fill with tears, with the terrible certainty that her expulsion from the academy is inevitable. Shindo assesses the gravity of the scenario and concludes he needs to urgently make that forged note disappear in some way. He plans to fire a fast spell of reduced power so that no one can see or hear the spell's trajectory. The young man uses the fast fire mode of his magic projectile, sending a precise attack under the desks. Shindo smiles discreetly, aware that his hidden spell was perfectly capable of destroying the fake evidence. Kagami looks at her friend with a mixture of anxiety and relief upon realizing his silent movement to save her. The teacher bends down to inspect the floor under the desk and notes, intrigued that there is absolutely nothing there. The accusing student screams in disbelief at the teacher's finding, as she was sure the paper was exactly there. The teacher reprimands the young woman, reminding her that one should not make false accusations of cheating without presenting real evidence. However, he ponders that the multiple accusations cannot be ignored and that the young woman's behavior seemed suspicious. The teacher decides he will perform a deeper investigation by analyzing her grades before making a final decision. The teacher orders Kagami to see him in the pedagogical orientation room right after classes end. Quite shaken by all that confusion, the girl just nods positively and accepts the order. During lunchtime, Kagami remains sitting alone at her desk while the others talk. She listens to the malicious gossip of the students who continue saying that Class D is full of ignorant people. The students comment that she threw her big chance away by trying to cheat right after managing to move up to Class B. Kagami grips her hands tightly upon hearing that she should give up on school for not possessing any self-pride. Shindo observes the scene from afar and realizes that even students outside the cluster have started to suspect the girl. He knows that the constant psychological pressure will make it impossible for Kagami to continue attending classes normally. Feeling a deep anger at the rival group's cowardly method, Shindo grinds his teeth and decides he will not stay silent. Taken by a great fury, the young man decides to act upon finding all that cluster manipulation extremely disgusting. Shindo walks with determination and abruptly opens the door of the room where the elite group members gather. Kagami looks toward the classroom exit with surprise upon noticing Shindo's sudden absence from the room. The elite class students observe Shindo's entry with expressions of suspicion and mockery. He enters the premises with firm steps and focuses his gaze directly on the leader who commands all the cheating. Shindo confronts his rival face to face, demonstrating he has no fear at all of facing the academy's leadership. Neo-Jin remains sitting calmly in his armchair and comments that he was already expecting the boy's imminent arrival. With disdain, the leader says he heard rumors about a failing student from his class who was caught cheating on the test. Shindo counters immediately by stating that setting up a fake accusation of cheating against her was a very low act. Neo-Jin smiles sarcastically and comments that his accusation is nothing but a silly allegation without real proof. He mocks, saying Shindo is just having difficulty accepting his friend's guilt and protecting a liar. Cluster leader ironizes, stating that it takes a lot of courage to expose the fraud committed by other colleagues. Shindo responds that hearing a speech about courage coming from the leader of a fraud gang is something comical. Neo-Jin stands up irritably and challenges Shindo to present some solid proof that the report against the girl is false. He exhibits a victorious smile, certain that the young man does not possess any evidence to prove Kagami's innocence. The leader orders Shindo to prepare to say goodbye to his friend as soon as she is formally expelled from the institution. He laughs, saying that a person without an academic diploma is practically dead in this society obsessed with status. Shindo thinks that privileged people like him will never know the true pain of being discarded and excluded from everything. He recalls the agony of his past life in the gutter, where he felt in his skin the real dread of death and social abandonment. With a dark and scary look, Shindo warns his rival not to dare play with his patience. Neo-Jin snaps his fingers hard to intimidate the boy, scaring one of his subordinates with the aggressive reaction. The cluster leader exhibits a devilish look and asks if Shindo really wants to start a physical confrontation there. Shindo guarantees he does not want to fight to avoid his own expulsion, but promises he will not let the setup go unpunished. The young man points his finger and makes a clear warning that his rival will bitterly regret having turned him into an enemy. Back in class, the teacher ends the day's activities and prepares to begin the formal investigations. Kagami is scared to hear the teacher call her name firmly in front of all the other students in the room. The teacher orders her to accompany him to the disciplinary room to begin the detailed verification of her answers. She agrees tremblingly and discouraged, feeling that her tragic destiny of expulsion is getting closer and closer. Her classmates whisper, saying that is the deserved end for those who do not know their proper place in the school hierarchy. Unexpectedly, Shindo raises his hand in the back of the room, asking for the teacher to wait a moment before leaving. The teacher turns around, intrigued by the sudden interruption, and questions what the young man wishes to talk about so importantly. Shindo stands up from his desk and announces he has an urgent proposal to make regarding that accusation. He focuses his gaze toward the teacher to discuss the fraud report that is threatening Kagami's future. The young man points out that no real physical proof of cheating was found on her desk during the entire check. The teacher agrees but explains that the lack of evidence to prove her innocence makes the investigation in the disciplinary room necessary. To the absolute astonishment of everyone, Shindo declares in a loud voice that he himself suspects Kagami actually cheated. The girl is completely in shock upon hearing her only ally turn against her in such an unexpected way. Shindo argues that the lack of physical evidence could indicate the accused destroyed the evidence using some skill. He suggests the school perform a detailed search for skillmatic traces to discover the truth of what happened. Kagami watches the young man with eyes welled with pain, unable to understand the motive for that apparent betrayal of his. She suddenly realizes that if they search for skill traces, the investigators will find the registration of Shindo's magic. Kagami realizes Shindo is intentionally calling all the suspicion of cheating onto himself to manage to spare her. The girl grips her fist, determined not to cause any more problems for the young man who helped her so much. She tries to speak to defend herself, but another colleague stands up suddenly, calling the attention of everyone in the room. The classmate questions the accusation, suggesting that the whole story about cheating could be just a misunderstanding. Kagami observes the scene with extreme surprise upon noticing that other people in the room have started to defend her spontaneously. Two students testify in favor of Kagami, guaranteeing that she did not act suspiciously at any moment of the test. The initial accuser enters a panic upon seeing her own classmates doubting her report against the girl. One of the witnesses confronts the accuser, reminding her that she did not find any physical proof under the desk. The rest of the class starts murmuring, saying the report was fake, and that Kagami would never commit the cheating. The culprit swallows hard upon realizing her plan failed terribly, and that the situation turned against herself. Realizing that the net has closed in, she decides she has no other choice but to admit the truth to the teacher. She calls the teacher's attention tensely as she prepares to confess what really happened on the test. The accuser makes a deep bow in front of the class, asking for sincere apologies for the confusion she ended up creating. She admits she messed with Kagami's desk without authorization right after the end of the test to try to find something suspicious. Kagami observes her colleague with astonishment upon hearing that unexpected confession in front of all the students in the class. The girl confesses that she found a paper she thought was a cheat sheet, but that in truth had no relation to the exam. The teacher is completely shocked and surprised by that sudden twist in the cheating accusation case. She explains that she was afraid to tell the truth after the situation went out of control and gained immense proportions. The student bows again in apology, putting an end once and for all to the rumor that Kagami had cheated on the exam. In the late afternoon, Shindo and Kagami walk home together while he comments with satisfaction that everything went well. Intrigued by the outcome of the facts, Kagami asks the young man what really happened behind the scenes of that farce. She confesses that there really was a cheat sheet hidden on her desk and that she does not understand why it disappeared. Shindo explains that the cluster members who planted the evidence knew very well that it was not a misunderstanding. The girl questions the reason why the rivals themselves started defending her so suddenly in the end. Shindo looks at her with serenity and responds simply that the explanation for that is much more obvious. He reveals that the rival group members would be totally ruined if a magic skill search were performed. The young man explains that the cluster uses magic telepathy secretly to share the right answers among themselves. A search for skill traces to investigate Kagami's cheating would end up revealing the entire farce of the elite group. Because of this, the cheaters had no choice but to defend her to stifle the case as quickly as possible. Shindo says he realized the trap right away and knew it would be impossible to prove her innocence in a common way. He reveals he gave up looking for evidence from the beginning and focused on resolving the incident by forcing the rivals to retreat. Suddenly, the young man interrupts his explanation upon hearing the low and contained crying of the girl walking right by his side. Worried about her reaction, Shindo stops walking and asks what is going wrong with his companion. Kagami cries copiously and thanks him from the bottom of her heart for the indispensable support of the young man who saved her life. She cries with relief upon confessing that she truly believed she would be expelled permanently from the prestigious academy. The girl admits that none of this would have been possible if Shindo were not by her side to protect her all the time. Shindo puts his hand on her head with affection and says gently that she does not need to worry about anything else. The young man opens a slight smile and states calmly that he only did what was strictly necessary to help her. He confesses sincerely that he is genuinely relieved to see that in the end, everything worked out for Kagami's future. Meanwhile, Neo-Jin remains in his room accompanied by his elite subordinates to plan his next step. One of the lackeys enters running into the room, bringing in his hands the sheet containing the official results of Shindo's tests. The group leader takes the document and is surprised to notice that the young man managed to obtain a top grade in all subjects. Neo-Jin admits that although the Class B test is different from his, the young man demonstrated having a very sharp mind. The lackey reports that by leading the written and practical tests, Shindo secured the right to dispute the promotion to Class A. The cluster leader reflects with irritation on how all previous sabotage attempts failed miserably. Faced with this, he throws the papers into the air and declares with fury that they need to crush the young man with overwhelming power. Neo-Jin exhibits a cruel and wicked expression while addressing a very powerful ally who was waiting in the shadows. He summons Ashuma Akira, the 7th best student of the year and widely feared for being known as the projectile hunter. The next day, Shindo and Kagami meet in a quiet cafeteria to talk about the new academic challenges. The girl asks apprehensively if he is really determined to dispute the dangerous class promotion exam. Shindo explains that the students with the best grades in Class B earn the opportunity to move up to Class A. He details that the only condition to obtain the promotion is to defeat the 10th, placed in the general ranking in a duel. The young man recalls that he obtained first place both in the practical exams in the dungeon and in the written evaluations with a clenched fist. Shindo states with extreme confidence that he has finally conquered the right to dispute the duel. Kagami is excited to know about the challenge and promises to go to the battlefield to cheer with all her strength. Shindo thanks his friend's support with a friendly smile, feeling motivated to face the important dispute. She asks when he will do the challenge, and he responds directly that there are no reasons to wait, and he will go now. In the first instant, she just accepts the answer with a cute smile. Before processing the madness of that decision, Kagami lets out a scream of complete astonishment upon realizing he intends to carry out the dangerous duel at that exact moment. Shindo walks alone through the school's outdoor area toward the location of the confrontation. Under the light of the sunset, he checks the time on his cell phone, noting it is past 5 in the afternoon and that he is at the perfect moment. He knows the cluster will try to sabotage the duel in some way, just as they tried to frame Kagami in the written exam. The young man decides to advance as quickly as possible so the rivals do not have time to prepare any cheating against him. Shindo consults his device to verify the combat data of the student, who currently occupies the 10th position. He analyzes the profile of the original opponent, a strong and imposing young man called Taisei Kuramata. The young man discovers that the adversary is a user of steel armor specialized in heavy defense, acting as a tank. Shindo concludes that the opponent is basically a much more powerful and improved version of the stone warrior Iwaki. He deduces that no common attack will be able to scratch that heavy metallic defense other than his concentrated shot. Even knowing that it would be a problematic opponent, Shindo follows confidently toward the arena with a determined smile. The young man walks with long strides, focused on concluding the promotion challenge as quickly as possible to move up a class. Upon entering the combat location, Shindo is surprised to find a totally different person waiting for him. He finds the boy's presence strange, remembering that only the official participants of the duel should have access to the arena. The intruder confirms that only the two duelists can be there and advances calmly toward Shindo in the arena. With an ironic smile, the newcomer reveals that he himself will be the opponent Shindo will need to face in the fight. Shindo realizes the opponent's mental game and smiles discreetly from the corner of his mouth upon understanding the gravity of the situation. He praises the rival group's speed of action, identifying the opponent as the most powerful combat force of the cluster. The opponent is none other than Akira Ashima, the feared 7th, placed in the Academy's general student ranking. Akira reveals mockingly that he officially assumed the 10th position of the ranking only 10 minutes ago. Shindo deduces that Akira challenged the former 10th placed and lost on purpose to fall in position and face him. He realizes the cluster used a loophole in the rules to send their best warrior directly against him in the duel. Shindo understands that the leader Neo Jin is acting with total seriousness to ensure he is crushed for good. Akira comments that Shindo simply had bad luck to have his promotion path blocked by such a strong opponent. The elite warrior questions why Shindo refused the cluster's invitation, since he should have foreseen that this would happen. Akira asks what is Shindo's true opinion regarding the organization and the functioning of the cluster. He himself admits that he does not consider the group fair, but finds the organization attractive enough to be followed by everyone. Akira inquires if ensuring one's own safety and stability by following the strongest leaders would not be enough. Shindo lets out a brief, mocking laugh and finds that the personal values of the two are completely different. He states firmly that his great life dream would never be reached if he decided just to follow the cluster. The young man explains that for someone limited to the magic projectile, obtaining only reasonable grades is not enough to win. Shindo points out that the cluster is a perfect organization for those who wish only to obtain median grades without striving much. Clenching his fist, he states he needs a spectacular performance to overcome the handicap of his only ability. Shindo concludes that mixing with their group would not bring any advantage, this being the reason for having refused the invitation. Akira shakes his head, confused, unable to understand what kind of dream would be worth taking such extreme risks. Shindo glares at him seriously and responds dryly that he is not asking for his understanding or approval. The combat system announces formally the start of the promotion duel between Akira Aoshima and Shindo Kazuki in the arena. Akira states he hates taking unnecessary risks and prefers just to live with safety and have stable results. With a cold look, he warns Shindo not to hold a grudge for what will happen, since the fight is a fruit of his choices. Shindo smiles with total confidence and responds that he will not feel any grudge, as he is sure he will emerge the winner. The start signal echoes through the entire battlefield, and Shindo positions himself immediately for the combat against the rival. Without losing time, the young man points his finger, fires a fast sequence of shots to prevent Akira's initial defense. Akira activates his automatic defense barrier that blocks easily the fast shot made by Shindo. He smiles and asks if the rival really thought that his defense would be weak right at the beginning of the battle. Akira brags, saying that no magic projectile can touch him, making him the projectile hunter. Shindo points to the adversary and says he needs to emphasize something very important now that he saw reality. The young man asks with a serious look for Akira not to hold resentment regardless of the final result. The two competitors stare at each other in the center of the empty arena, while the protection barrier around remains active. In the stands, Kagami watches the arena worriedly and whispers the name of her friend, cheering for his victory. The students in the stands are shocked upon noticing the arrival of two very important figures to watch. A girl with light blue hair and a blonde young man with glasses approach to observe the combat closely. The young man with glasses comments that his first time sees his companions showing interest in someone else's fight. The girl with light hair responds coldly, saying she has no special reason to be there. He just adjusts his glasses and accepts her answer in silence while he continues observing the duelists. She explains that she wants to see how a common user of a magic projectile will face the feared projectile hunter. The young man with glasses says he will observe the unfolding of that intriguing battle to see what happens. Shindo analyzes the green barrier of the opponent and realizes it is a very strong automatic defense skill. The young man admits that creating automatic barriers is something useful, but points out that every ability has its weakness. He decides to test the rival by firing his technique of projectiles, divided in several directions at the same time. Akira warns that expanding the attack area is useless because his level 3 barrier blocks everything without effort. The projectile hunter invokes a level 3 green weapon in his right hand to begin his offensive. He points the shining weapon toward the protagonist, announcing that now it is his turn to go on the attack. Shindo activates his shield, knowing that hitting frontally against the shots of an invoked weapon would be a big mistake. He begins to deflect the trajectory of the shots, using the angle of his blue shield to protect himself from the shots. The protagonist takes advantage of the defense moment to run swiftly toward the adversary, shortening the distance. In the stands, Kagami gets excited upon seeing that her friend got close enough to fire his concentrated shots. Shindo takes advantage of the proximity to unleash a powerful piercing energy attack against Akira's defense. The tremendous impact of the concentrated attack is strong enough to shatter the opponent's protective barrier. Akira exhibits a corner smile and activates instantly another level 3 barrier to protect himself from the advance. The new shiny shield appears just in time and blocks completely the concentrated projectile fired by the rival. Kagami watches the scene perplexed, unable to believe that his strongest attack was stopped so easily. The enemy smiles and mocks, asking if he really thought that it was enough to pass through the automatic defense to win. He recognizes the rival's strength, but decides that from now on he will not allow him to get close again. Shindo retreats and fires a ricochet projectile that makes a surprising curve in the air to try to hit the target. Akira finds the attack extremely slow and just dodges to the side without needing to spend energy blocking. Suddenly, the shot makes a sharp curve and returns swiftly, catching the hunter by surprise from behind. Kagami becomes hopeful upon noting that the spell's trajectory changed in such a genius way to catch the opponent. However, the projectile is intercepted in the last second by the automatic barrier that reacts instantly to the danger. Shindo laments in silence upon seeing that even his surprise attack from behind ended up failing before that barrier. Akira reveals he already knew this technique of changing the shot's direction. After watching the protagonist's previous duel, he explains that his automatic defense reacts alone and blocks even the blows that he himself cannot see. The projectile hunter smiles victoriously, stating that no type of surprise attack will work against him in the fight. Decided to test the adversary's limits, Shindo begins to fire a continuous burst with maximum power. Akira activates his level 3 barrier again to support the tremendous impact of the sequence of fast attacks. The enormous pressure of the concentrated projectiles is too much for the shield that ends up shattering completely again. Kagami celebrates joyfully upon seeing that her friend's shots finally managed to break the opponent's barrier. The blue projectile hits square the chest of the projectile hunter, who lets out a scream with the force of the direct impact. Despite the scare, the elite warrior recovers quickly, demonstrating not having suffered almost any real damage. He reveals that he possesses a magic resistance ability that drastically reduces the damage received by spells. Akira asks if the rival understood that his common shots will never be able to cause any real injury. The projectile hunter states, with total disdain, that even if the rival manages to hit him, his victory is impossible. In the stands, Kagami becomes desperate upon realizing the opponent possesses a defense that seems to be insurmountable. Akira admits internally that he did not expect so much strength from a mage who uses only the basic projectile ability. He thinks that if Shindo possessed only one more ability besides that one, he would certainly be an unbeatable adversary. He exhibits his green weapon, confident that he has almost a 100% chance of victory if the duel continues at that pace. Even being at a wide advantage, the projectile hunter decides to advance without lowering his guard to ensure the result. He plans to keep a safe distance while firing repeatedly to wear down the protagonist until defeat. Shindo realizes the adversary is on another level and seeks to ensure the victory without demonstrating any ounce of carelessness. The protagonist blocks the shots, using his blue shield, but feels the great pressure of the rival's continuous shots. Kagami watches afflicted, noting that even Shindo is being pressured by the school's feared projectile hunter. She joins her hands strongly and cheers in silence for the young man to manage to resist and win that difficult battle. Shindo realizes the rival is using a perfect strategy to prevent any attempt at approach from him. Akira fires without stopping, thinking that any proud mage would be desperate when being pressured by a low level. Shindo knows he will lose by fatigue if he continues on the defensive and decides he needs to reveal his secret trump card now. With a confident smile, the young man prepares to use the technique that will destroy the rival's protective barrier for good. He concentrates his magic energy around his body, preparing a special move never before seen at the academy. The blue-haired young man decides to activate his mysterious, secret technique called Invisible Style to attack. Akira notices something strange in the air and is confused, unable to understand what move the rival intends to make. Shindo makes the firing gesture with his finger, but no visible magic projectile appears before the eyes of the spectators. The projectile hunter is scared upon noting that the adversary's spell seems to have simply disappeared out of thin air. Unexpectedly, Akira is hit by a devastating impact that makes him scream in pain as he is thrown backward. He stands up stunned, trying to understand how he was hit by the attack if the automatic barrier was active. Shindo just smiles from the corner of his mouth and reveals calmly that that is the power of his invisible style technique. He explains that he fired a completely invisible projectile that manages to bypass the enemy's normal perception. Akira is in maximum alert upon realizing the adversary is preparing to unleash one more of those attacks. The warrior thinks that even without seeing the shot, he will be able to block it if he manages to predict the projectile's trajectory. However, he is hit violently once more in the shoulder by another relentless shot that emerges from absolute nothingness. The projectile hunter enters total panic without understanding the motive for not being able to defend himself at all. He realizes shocked that the mysterious attack did not break his shield, but passed directly through the defense. Akira starts suspecting the rival's spell is not only invisible, but also capable of passing through barriers. Completely powerless before the overwhelming attack, the elite warrior collapses on the combat arena floor. He tries to stand up but realizes his automatic barrier continues failing against the rival's mysterious shots. Shindo points calmly his finger toward the fallen enemy, indicating that the combat has reached its decisive moment. The protagonist walks slowly and says the adversary ended up failing in his mission to neutralize his spells. He looks down at the projectile hunter and ironizes the famous combat title that the boy carried with pride. Shindo points his finger very close to the rival's neck, asking if he can activate a barrier at that distance. He warns that not even the magic resistance skill will save the rival from a direct impact at point-blank range without defense. The protagonist fires his maximum power piercing attack, ending the confrontation with a devastating explosion. The projectile hunter screams in agony while being thrown far away by the force of the protagonist's shot. The elite warrior is left completely stretched out on the arena floor, unconscious after receiving the terrible attack. The system announces officially the victory of Shindo, who now assumes the 10th position in the general ranking of the school. The audience is in a complete state of shock upon seeing the feared projectile hunter being defeated in a humiliating way. Shindo looks at the rival passed out on the arena floor and apologizes, ironically, for the end of his hunter fame. The protagonist adjusts his clothing, thinking that he could never afford the luxury of being defeated at that crucial moment. The students in the stands begin to murmur, perplexed, wondering how an invisible projectile is even possible. The young man with glasses comments pensively that using invisible shots was an extremely interesting idea. He smiles and adjusts his glasses, pointing out that in fact all that is about a very well elaborated trick. The girl with light hair agrees and states that the young man did not fire invisible projectiles for real in the fight. She explains that if they were just invisible shots, the adversary's automatic barrier would still have blocked them. The blonde young man compliments by saying the automatic shield activates alone upon detecting any threat that approaches. He deduces the protagonist's shots did not break the defense but passed through it by some other method. Without interest in continuing to watch, the young woman stands up from her seat, saying the duel is over and leaves. The young man with glasses also decides to withdraw from the stands to return soon to his daily obligations. He comments calmly that starting tomorrow, the protagonist will officially be their new classmate. With an enigmatic look, the young man says he is quite anxious to see how the young man will do in the competitive Class A. The next day, Shindo and Kagami meet right at the entrance of the student dormitory to start the new journey. Kagami smiles joyfully upon reminding her friend that from today on, he is officially a member of the elite Class A. She praises the young man's look, saying that the new red tie tickle of class matches perfectly with him. Shindo is left slightly awkward with the comment and adjusts his tie shyly, thanking her for the compliment. The young man makes a point of thanking the girl for all the constant support that she gave during his journey to the top. He admits sincerely that he would not have managed to move up a class so easily without her indispensable presence. Kagami gestures shyly and nervously, saying that she is the one who should thank him for everything he did in the past. She recalls with affection the moment in which she accepted his help and confesses how happy she is for having made that decision. Even knowing that they will be in different classes, she guarantees that she will continue cheering for him with all her strength. Shindo smiles warmly and thanks from the bottom of his heart for the sincere support that he always receives from his great friend. He warns that the rival group should no longer bother her, but asks that she look for him in case she faces any future problem. The girl with purple hair blushes slightly and thanks him for the concern, demonstrating she is very happy with his care. With a beautiful smile on her face, she tries to reassure him, guaranteeing that she will be perfectly fine starting now. The girl explains that she wishes to strive, using her own strength from now on to evolve at the academy. She tells that her great goal is to manage to graduate from the renowned educational institution with a lot of self-pride. Shindo agrees with her words and proposes that both give their best, even being in distinct classes. The two seal the commitment with a firm handshake, demonstrating the strong union and friendship that exists between them. Right after, the protagonist walks alone through the silent corridors toward his new classroom. He stops in front of the class door, remembering that he never managed to reach this elite level in his previous life. Suddenly, he is interrupted by a male voice that greets him very casually right there nearby. Nyo-jin appears leaning against the wall with an ironic smile, giving welcome to the newest member of the elite room. The rival group leader exhibits a challenging and imposing look upon presenting the special environment of Class A to him. He comments that his class move happened at a perfect moment, and Shindo questions the real meaning of that. The red-haired young man reveals that a very important special exam will be held for the students as early as tomorrow. He explains that the special elite evaluation is known as the Big Academy Representative Selection Test. Shindo glares at his rival seriously, knowing that the moment for a direct confrontation between the two has finally arrived. With a sadistic and threatening look, Neo-jin promises that he will make sure to crush the protagonist personally on the test. Inside the room, the teacher starts the explanation, warning everyone that the long-awaited summer vacation will start next week. The teacher ponders that before the recess, the Class A students will need to pass a very rigorous evaluation. He explains that in this period, the traditional and prestigious exchange tournament between the three big academies will occur. The bearded man adds that the best students from the elite room will be selected to represent the institution. Shindo listens to the explanations attentively, understanding the enormous strategic importance that evaluation possesses. The teacher announces in a solemn tone that will be in fact the official representative selection exam of the entire academy. On the screen, the official crests of the three prestigious educational institutions that will dispute the big tournament are displayed. The teacher details that annually the best warriors of each school are chosen to dispute this competition. He explains that the event is broadcast to the entire country, directly influencing the prestige and new enrollments. Because of this great repercussion, the exchange tournament became the most crucial event of the academic year. Clenching his own fist strongly, Shindo puts in his mind that is a golden opportunity that he needs to grab. He knows that he would be rejected at first in the enrollment of the elite university if he possessed only his basic ability. That is why he needs to shine intensely in the tournament to prove his unquestionable value to all the evaluators. The teacher reveals that the format of the test will be a real battle in a virtual environment where only two will emerge winners. He warns that the test will occur tomorrow morning and asks that everyone prepare with total seriousness for the big challenge. The students begin to disperse in silence after the teacher's official end of explanations about tomorrow's exam. Neo-jin passes right by the protagonist and comments with disdain that he got very lucky for having moved up a class now. He smiles provocatively, stating that the real battle format is absolutely perfect to finish him off. Nyo-jin is suddenly interrupted by someone who calls him by name seriously and firmly right behind him. The student council president approaches and warns that he will not tolerate direct threats against other colleagues there. Nyo-jin is quite irritated with the interruption and asks if the president wishes to be eliminated right there before the test. The girl with light hair appears at the location, calling for the full name of Shindo and calling the attention of everyone there. Everyone turns surprised toward the young woman who approaches calmly, interrupting the rapist's discussion. She points decidedly toward the protagonist and states in a loud voice that she has finally managed to remember his name. Shindo sketches a slightly awkward smile and responds that he is glad she finally remembered him. The young woman declares with absolute conviction that she will be the great winner of the special exam that will be held tomorrow. Right after, she turns her back and withdraws from the location, leaving the boys without understanding anything of that sudden provocation. Shindo watches the girl go away and comments, shocked that she simply appeared just to say that and vanish. He lets out a sigh from the corner of his mouth and decides not to give so much importance to that peculiar attitude of the young woman. The young man clenches his fist animatedly, thinking that he will save all the fun and his energy for tomorrow's combat. The next day dawns with a clear, open sky, signaling that the time for the big exam has finally arrived. All the students from the prestigious Class A gather at the test site, anxious and talking about their expectations. Suddenly, a classmate waves happily at Shindo, welcoming the newcomer to the group. Shindo turns around and is extremely surprised to recognize the person who greeted him. He is confused, as he thought the defeated opponent would be moved down to Class B after the duel. The projectile hunter smiles and reveals that he challenged the 10th place student this morning to win back his spot in the elite. The protagonist is intrigued and wonders how his rival managed to face the 10th place student so quickly. He decides to check the updates on his phone to understand what really happened with the school rankings. Shindo's eyes widen as he notices on his device that he now officially holds the 7th position in the general ranking. He finally understands why he received a very strange duel challenge late the previous afternoon. The protagonist remembers that the rival who challenged him last night surrendered immediately after he accepted. He deduces that Neo Jin forced that student to challenge him and give up on purpose, just to make him climb the rankings. With that, the projectile hunter was able to easily defeat the downgraded student and reclaim his spot in Class A. The young man realizes that the group leader uses his own organization members as disposable pieces in his plans. He concludes that the allies obey blindly because they know they will be rescued quickly if they suffer any setback. The young man notices that even while facing daily hardships, the cluster members are guaranteed protection from their leader in the end. He realizes that it is through this cycle of favors and control that the rival remains at the top as the absolute king of that place. Akira comments calmly that, in all likelihood, the two of them will not need to face each other in today's special exam. The protagonist looks at him with suspicion and asks what the projectile hunter means by that statement. He reveals that his direct orders are just to ensure that no one interferes with Neo Jin's duel against the protagonist. Akira adds that the cluster leader is very eager to crush Shindo in a direct confrontation during the exam. The hunter admits that he will only play his part in clearing the path so that the boss can achieve his desired victory. Suddenly, the teacher enters the room and announces aloud that all selected students are present. He solemnly declares the official start of the important selection exam for the Academy's representatives. The instructor explains that the virtual battlefield chosen for the dispute will be a simulation of city ruins. He guarantees that because it is a simulation, the participants will not be in any life-threatening danger, even if they suffer serious damage. However, the man warns that all sensations will be identical to real combat before starting the transport. The virtual setting of the city ruins materializes perfectly before everyone, signaling the start of the test. The protagonist's physical structure begins to form in the simulation rapidly through beams of blue light. Shindo appears standing amidst the rubble and confirms with a serious look that the dangerous evaluation has finally begun. The young man analyzes the surrounding environment and remembers that he never had the chance to take this test in his past life. He knows he is at a disadvantage because he does not know the territory as well as the other elite class students. However, he decides there is no time for regrets and that he needs to move cautiously to avoid being caught off guard. Unexpectedly, the protagonist's eyes widen in astonishment as he senses a very strange presence nearby. He is shocked to realize he has been detected by a very powerful radar ability from an opponent close by. Shindo looks around attentively but notes, intrigued, that there is no physical sign of any person in his field of vision. He deduces that the enemy radar's range is over 100 meters, indicating that the rival's skill is of a high level. Knowing his exact location has been revealed to an opponent, the protagonist decides to run to change his position. Positioned at the top of a building, the student council president prepares coolly to launch his attack. The young man fires a powerful level 3 curved projectile from the top of the building toward the protagonist. Shindo smiles, saying that his opponent made a terrible mistake by preventing his approach early on. He explains that he would not have been able to use the rival's bombardment against him if he had kept his distance. The opponent in glasses falls into complete despair as he is swallowed by the powerful impact of his own explosion. The protagonist makes a quick escape move to dodge the massive shock wave generated by the detonation. With the official elimination of Sojiro Shirasaya, the system announces that only 2 participants remain in the test. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief as he realizes that the sealing effect has ended and he can fire his spells again. A familiar silhouette appears, jumping from atop a wall, indicating that the elite battle has not yet ended. Shindo faces the mysterious figure and says that the final confrontation cannot simply end without a good fight. He spots the talented Hisame Hamikawa positioned just below him, waiting patiently for the final duel. The young woman with light blue hair looks straight up, showing that she is ready for the decisive combat. Shindo displays an excited smile, declaring that this duel will be the long-awaited rematch between the 2 rivals. Returning to the previous moment, the protagonist points his finger in an intimidating way, stating that the duel would end right there. He focuses his energy and fires a powerful piercing projectile at maximum speed towards Shirasaya. However, the rival smiles mischievously and activates his ability, sealing technique upon touching the attack. Shindo panics as he notices his hand starting to release smoke and that his spell has been completely nullified. The adversary takes advantage of the gap to land a quick palm strike to push the protagonist away. Shindo is thrown back by the impact but manages to steady himself on the simulation sandy ground. Even while injured, the young man grits his teeth as he realizes the opponent managed to retreat strategically to catch his breath. With a focused and attentive gaze, the protagonist quickly analyzes his combat options to try to turn the tide. He tries to conjure his spell again but notes, frustrated, that he is still unable to fire projectiles. The young man deduces he was hit by an ability sealer capable of temporarily blocking his only attack skill. He recalls the terrible feeling of failure he felt in the past when his magic simply did not work. Shindo shakes his head determinedly, knowing he cannot let himself be shaken by old traumas at this moment. He reflects that for someone who possesses only one ability, this sealing is basically a sentence of absolute defeat. The young man realizes grimly that without his only spell, he is basically an ordinary human without any magical power. Shirasaya displays a smug smile, confirming that the distance gained ensures his total victory. He points out that the protagonist can no longer force a counterattack or even escape his sight on that high terrace. The opponent prepares his next shot, combining his curved magic with a powerful explosive detonation attribute. Shirasaya points his thumb confidently, cynically declaring the definite end of the duel for Shindo. Shindo shows a discreet smile, retorting that his adversary should not celebrate victory so soon. He recalls that he was always considered a talentless failure for possessing only the magic projectile as an ability. The young man advances with determination and focuses all his strength on his own physical body to initiate the counterattack. He runs quickly, revealing that he learned to fight and survive without depending on any special ability. Shirasaya mocks the rival's physical charge, considering the desperate running a useless effort. He extends his arm with speed, activating his iron stake technique to pierce the protagonist on his way. The metal spikes hit the ground with extreme violence, shattering the concrete around and kicking up dust. Shindo dodges the spikes with agility and continues advancing, even under the relentless aim of the bespectacled opponent. The adversary praises Shindo's courage for trying to get closer, but states that the charge was a big mistake. Shirasaya fires his curved detonation spell, claiming the rival's approach plan was far too reckless. Shindo just smiles calmly, denying the adversary's words with total firmness and confidence in his gaze. He lands a precise kick toward the debris on the ground, stating that his strategy has just been completed. The bespectacled rival widens his eyes in complete astonishment, unable to comprehend what his true intention is. Shindo kicks the shattered concrete pieces toward the adversary's shot to provoke a collision in mid-air. The opponent finally perceives the clever trap and begins to break into a cold sweat at the revelation of the protagonist's plan. He understands that Shindo intentionally forced him to use the iron spikes to generate those stone fragments. Shindo explains that the danger of a nearby detonation drastically limited the rival's defensive and attack options. He details that the enemy's only safe option was to fire the spikes at the ground, generating the ammunition he needed. Shirasaya laments bitterly as he is hit squarely by the impact of his own magic, reflected by the stones. The dust settles, revealing the destroyed streets of the city simulation, now under a complete and deep silence. Hidden behind a wall, Shindo notes with focus that there are only 2 other active competitors left besides him in the test. Shindo realizes that their positions indicate he will likely encounter Shirasaya first. Suddenly, several magic projectiles begin to fall from the sky, and the protagonist notices that the enemy has indeed appeared. A gigantic explosion occurs on the spot, lifting a huge blue smoke cloud throughout the area. The protagonist runs to escape the attack, realizing that the shots are falling in a parabolic trajectory. He deduces quickly that the opponent must have climbed to a very high point to manage to extend his range. Taking advantage of the large smoke curtain generated by the impacts, the young man decides to advance stealthily. Shindo activates his floating mode, releasing bluish energy orbs around his body to gain speed. He leaps through the skies of the ruined city, now having a clear idea of where the enemy's shots are coming from. From up there, he finally manages to locate Shirasaya, positioned at the top of one of the buildings. Shindo shouts excitedly upon finding his target and prepares to land a perfect surprise strike. Shirasaya perceives the quick approach amidst the explosions and fires a bright spell to defend himself. The protagonist knows the curved bombardment is strong but becomes useless in close quarters combat. He realizes that by fighting so closely, the enemy himself runs the serious risk of blowing himself up with his own magic. Shirasaya clicks his tongue in annoyance upon seeing that the young man managed to close the combat space so easily. The young man trusts in his tuning ability, which allows him to adapt perfectly to any type of terrain. He advances with everything toward the opponent, convinced that he now possesses all the tactical advantage of the fight. Shirasaya activates his level 3 Iron Thorn technique, throwing sharp chains against the intruder. Shindo reacts quickly, activating his blue barrier to successfully block the enemy's metallic attacks. Meanwhile, an observer thinks that Shindo will never be able to defeat the true threat of the tournament. Gigantic ice spikes freeze the entire street, showing that opponent is, in fact, a monster. The system announces Akira's elimination, with only 3 participants active in the simulation dispute. Shirasaya observes everything from atop a wall, maintaining his calm posture while evaluating the current situation. The young man in glasses thinks that there are only 2 spots available for the great team of representatives. He has absolute certainty that one of those valuable spots is already guaranteed for the incredible his aim. With that, he adjusts his glasses, aware that all other participants are fighting for the final space. He admits that he intended only to wear Jin down, but never imagined that Shindo would be capable of defeating him first. Even recognizing the protagonist's surprising strength, he displays a sadistic smile, showing that he will not lose. Shirasaya states with disdain that he is an even worse opponent for the young man than the projectile hunter himself. Shindo understands that to land a finishing blow, he will always need to get quite close to the enemy. The rival prepares to counterattack with his chains the exact moment the protagonist steps into his area. Shindo is caught by a quick attack but stays firm. Even in the face of the red-haired adversary's charge, the protagonist smiles, revealing that he already knew the enemy would try to use a counterattack against him. Jin is completely shocked to realize that his movements were predicted by the adversary. Shindo instantly activates his maximum, power-piercing shot to finish the confrontation. The enormous flow of blue energy hits Jin, who tries to resist the devastating impact of the spell. Jin displays his bruised hand and says ironically that was just a joke. The redhead reveals that he already expected the protagonist to try to read his strategy to apply a counterattack. He states, laughing, that everything is going exactly the way he had planned from the beginning. Jin extends his hand to grab the rival, but Shindo just asks calmly if he really thinks that. The protagonist mocks the enemy, stating that he was already one step ahead of that whole play. Jin widens his eyes in astonishment upon realizing that something wrong is happening with his movements. Shindo reveals calmly that his true goal from the beginning of the combat was another. He explains that he just wanted to touch Jin's body to manage to tune into his resistance ability. The young man forces the opponent's defensive ability to go into overload, draining all his stamina rapidly. Jin lets out a scream of pain as he feels a terrible weakness spread through his muscles suddenly. The redhead panics as he notices that his physical strength has been completely drained from his body. He questions if the protagonist has been hiding a technique that does not use magic during all this time. The young man with red hair realizes that he will faint if he continues using his abilities at that frenetic pace. Desperate, he advances shouting and swings his chains to try one last attack against Shindo. Shindo smiles upon noticing that the enemy deactivated his defense to save energy, praising his quick reaction. Shindo points firmly toward his opponent, announcing that that is the checkmate of the confrontation. Without his main defensive ability active, the rival becomes an easy target to be defeated with just one shot. Lets out a desperate scream upon being hit squarely by the powerful impact of the protagonist's shot. Shindo comments that he already expected a counterattack from him and is happy he was such a capable adversary. The young man observes the destroyed scenery around him, declaring his well-deserved victory with total conviction. Fallen to the ground, Jin laments his defeat bitterly, while the system indicates that his damage limit has been exceeded. The redhead admits his direct defeat to the protagonist, while his virtual body begins to disintegrate. Jin promises with great anger that he will crush the protagonist in the next duel, as he will not accept losing again. Shindo is surprised to notice on the system screen that only 4 active participants remain in the tournament. The protagonist tries to understand the reason so many students were eliminated in such a short interval of time. He concludes thoughtfully that only his aim Hamikawa would be capable of defeating so many elite mages so quickly. In another part of the simulation, the young woman with blue hair walks imposingly, surrounded by several fallen opponents. One of the defeated students laments on the ground, knowing it was impossible to beat that monstrous opponent. Akira Oshima congratulates the protagonist for having managed to beat the powerful Jin against all expectations. The young man with green hair warns that Shindo will be stopped, as his arm was holding back until now in the competition. He states with conviction that he understands the situation perfectly, as he has already faced both in combat. Before disappearing completely, he recognizes sincerely the protagonist is, in fact, a first-class mage. Recalling the previous confrontation, a strong shot hits Jin's face, generating a large energy impact. The redhead shouts confidently that that type of weak attack will never work against his powerful physical defense. With a cynical smile on his face, the rival states that he has already managed to uncover the secret behind the invisible shot. He explains that the young man prepares an ordinary shot and cancels it on purpose to fire a fast one immediately after. Jin comments, this trick makes it seem like the first canceled shot hits the target with a slight delay. He reveals that all this action is just a distraction, as the projectile is actually too fast to be seen. The rival deduces that these shots are focused purely on speed, reaching absurd time per meter marks. This explains why the spell manages to get through the automatic barrier that only reacts to normal speeds. With a sharp gaze, the elite hunter points out that this fast shooting technique has an extremely serious flaw. While the protagonist advances, the enemy prepares to counterattack, knowing exactly what he will do. He shouts that a projectile focused only on speed does not possess enough destructive power to end the fight. The redhead provokes the rival aloud, claiming that those fast shots do not have the firepower to defeat him. Jin cracks the ground with his chains and shouts the protagonist's name defiantly in the middle of the arena. Shindo just smiles, responding calmly that the rival will not have the individual fight he wishes for. He activates his blue barrier shield quickly to block the wave of explosions happening around him. A huge trail of smoke and dust rises to the skies, indicating the extreme violence of the adversary's attacks. Shindo manages to resist the bombardment, confirming that his blue barrier is, in fact, resistant enough. He analyzes the trajectory of the last shot, received to calculate the exact location of the shooter. Sharasaya, protagonist, decides to move quickly in search of safe cover to avoid being hit again. Suddenly, sharp chains appear tearing through the air, with the opponent warning that the combat has not yet ended. Shindo is startled to see the attack pass very close to his face and grits his teeth in the face of the rival's pressure. Jin appears laughing loudly and guarantees, maniacally, that he would never be defeated by a bombardment of that level. The protagonist dodges the chains, realizing he will need to land a point-blank shot to win. He notes that the opponent possesses an excellent range with his chains. Besides having his physical attributes elevated, the young man realizes that the ordinary magic attacks continue being blocked by the rival's powerful physical resistance. He understands perfectly the reason Jin is known by everyone at the academy as the absolute king of that place. Even recognizing the adversary's great power, the protagonist refuses to retreat in the face of imminent danger. He remembers that he still has many obstacles and legendary opponents to overcome before reaching his goal. Shindo decides to put a definite end to that confrontation, pointing his arm to launch the next shot. He prepares to use his tuning technique, concentrating all the necessary energy on the tip of his finger. Jin displays a savage smile upon noticing the protagonist's charge, preparing his own defensive strike. The redhead states confidently that he has already memorized the movements of that ability during the previous fight against Akira. Another opponent appears shouting aggressively while trying to attack the protagonist by surprise. Jin remembers that everyone was desperate with that technique and called it the invisible projectile. He states that he is not like the other students, as he has already managed to uncover the adversary's trick completely. Jin challenges the young man to use his trump card, promising that he will destroy the attack right before his eyes. Shindo points his finger toward the rival, deciding to use that opportunity to open a gap in his defense. The redhead displays a sadistic expression, guaranteeing that the moment the shot is fired will be the end of the protagonist. With total focus, the young man with blue hair prepares to conjure his famous invisible style technique. A gigantic beam of magic energy rises toward the skies, provoking a huge shockwave in the arena. In another point of the battle, the student council president prepares to fire his attack against the rival. A devastating sequence of consecutive explosions hits the simulated area, lifting an immense curtain of dust. The dark smoke spreads rapidly through the scenery, completely covering the view of the simulation ruins. In the classroom, the students watch shocked, doubting that anyone can survive such destructive force. Shindo manages to escape the main impact, but is thrown back by the strong wind generated by the detonation. The young woman with purple hair screams, worried upon seeing that the protagonist is facing serious difficulties in the test. She joins her hands in a silent prayer, hoping desperately that he can resist that attack. The protagonist analyzes the destroyed ruins around him and lets out an annoyed sigh at the unfavorable situation. He runs quickly, knowing he failed in his initial plan to prevent the opponent from making the first move. Shindo realizes the enemy uses long-range radar abilities to track and carry out precise bombardments. The young man in glasses smiles, confident in his special tactic that became his great combat trademark. Shindo realizes he will be hit and eliminated if he continues receiving that incessant rain of explosive projectiles. Without options, the young man activates his tuning, changing the configuration of his shots to create a blue energy dispersion. He notes that the projectiles fired by the enemy are sensitive and explode immediately upon suffering any impact. The protagonist decides that the best strategy is to shoot at the rival spells before they hit the sandy ground. With this, the magics collide in mid-air, provoking safe aerial detonations that do not reach the protagonist's position. Taking advantage of the explosion dust, he decides to run to move as far as possible from the dangerous shooter's aim. Suddenly, Jin appears unexpectedly from behind a wall, shouting the protagonist's name aggressively. The redhead displays a savage smile upon finding the rival, demonstrating that he will not let him escape that confrontation. Shindo realizes, annoyed, that his previous counterattack ended up revealing his location to the enemy. Jin celebrates sadistically upon noticing that he finally managed to corner the adversary for a direct physical combat. The hunter invokes his red chains around his own body, preparing a violent charge against Shindo. He advances with everything, landing a furious strike with the metal chains while shouting provocation words. The protagonist defends himself, activating his blue barrier style quickly to contain the attack's great force. Shindo's protective shield ends up breaking under the tremendous impact, causing him to feel the grazing blow. The young man retreats, feeling the enormous pain of the physical charge and admits internally the great power of the opponent's attack. Jin shouts with anger, demanding that the adversary stop trying to run and start the direct confrontation with him already. Shindo activates his rapid fire mode, firing a continuous burst of small bluish energy projectiles. The projectiles hit the rival squarely in the chest, but seem to cause no real damage to his body. Jin lets out a mocking laugh, asking the protagonist if that weak attack is really all he possesses. The protagonist realizes, shocked, that the adversary has an extremely powerful physical resistance ability active. He concludes, worried, that facing rare abilities that guarantee total defense without losing agility will be a problem. The redhead continues chasing the young man with his chains, mocking the fact that he can only run from the confrontation. Shindo runs focused, responding seriously that at no moment of that pursuit was he actually running away. He crouches amidst the ruins, revealing that he only guided the rival's steps to the exact location he planned. Jin looks around, quite confused, upon realizing that he fell into a tactical trap in the middle of the ruined territory. With a smirk, Shindo says he does not know whether to praise his perception or mock his extreme slowness. He explains that that area is exactly the same point where he suffered the violent bombardment at the beginning of the test. This means that the two are positioned right in the middle of the danger zone of the dangerous Shirasaya's attacks. The protagonist begins to run to escape, leaving the opponent surprised by the sudden change in the situation. With eyes widened in panic, Jin notices the imminent danger upon seeing the reflection of the new projectiles falling from the sky.